Okay, so hello and welcome to Bizarre Sunday podcast with me. My name is Andy Matsky, and that's Matthew Buchanan. You probably, if you're listening to the show, you probably know us in real life, but if you don't, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
This podcast is the fruit of us just being like, hey, what if we did this? And then like one thing leading to another, I bought some gear and I was like, okay, we got to do this because it's an excuse to use what I bought.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of just, and you know, you said it, I think really well just before we started like recording on this, which is like just trying to bring some like good, clean fun, some light to the darkness of this world. So like, if you're listening to this, just know we probably have you in mind. Our audience is very narrow. If you've heard about the show before it's out, you're probably in the audience, the intended audience of this podcast. So we don't have any like cool tagline yet, but in this episode, we wanted to just, you know, give you guys the opportunity to get to know us a bit better.
Yeah.
Share maybe like a slightly extended version of our testimonies of salvation. A big part of this show is that we are both Christian young men, and we want to help guide other Christian young people, along in the Christian life, and kind of just provide a space where people can talk and, civilly about things. Cause, Matt here and him and I don't agree on everything, but we agree on way more than we disagree about. And we don't see that as reason to not like be friends.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any other kind of introductory thoughts.
No, I'm just here.
Yeah, we're just here. This is just for fun. Realistically, set your expectations to get like episodes a couple times a month. It's kind of like when we can get them done. We're in the middle of a really busy week right now and somehow still managing to try to get this done. But we'll see what the summer holds for both of us. Do you want to start us off?
Sure.
And tell us a bit about yourself and your testimony?
Yeah. So like Annie said, I'm Matt Buchanan. I grew up in PA, in Northeast PA, with two parents who are totally awesome people. My dad was a Baptist pastor, and my mom worked at a college as a counseling and psychology professor. And so life growing up was not the easiest as a Christian. I wanted to make poor life decisions, and my parents did not want me to do that and did not give me an avenue to do so. So I grew up not liking my parents, to say the very least. And being in Christian school throughout my early years, I did not have a lot of friends that I was close with, and it kind of made life hard because I'd be at school with people who didn't like me, and then I would come home to a family that I chose to not like. So that made life difficult. I made it difficult for myself. And so growing up, especially in that toddler to like even elementary school and middle school, I felt really alienated from the crowd that I was a part of. And it got to a point in really, I think I was 13 years old. I was going to youth group. My parents had basically forced us to go to this like youth group / Awana. And my youth leaders were talking that night specifically about the idea of heaven and hell. And it was kind of one of those, it kind of felt looking back like it was how we're going to scare you into salvation. And I hope that's not the heart behind their message, but I was certainly scared. And so for me, it was this, all right, I need to trust Jesus, and I need to stop making all these poor life decisions because I don't want to go to hell. So I pulled my youth leader aside, and he asked all the questions like, all right, like, what kind of is stirring in your heart right now? And I came up with some excuse about just, I want to change my ways. I know that I need to be, because I knew all the right answers growing up in church, and my dad was a pastor. And so I gave all the Sunday school ABC answers. But, in my heart, it wasn't, I'm trusting that Jesus is God, and I'm trusting that Jesus came down to this earth and gave his life. no, this was just a fear of, I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to burn. But for him, it was, I put on this theatrical performance of, oh, I want to trust, and so he asked me the right questions. He said, like, okay, so in your heart, do you believe? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, that's great. That's the answer. You don't have to pray some theatrical prayer to accept Jesus in your heart. You do it and you live it. And that was a cool moment for me because I had always heard, oh, you pray the prayer, you do the stuff. So that moment, I would say I accepted Christ into my heart, but with all of the wrong intentions in mind. And growing up a little later, a couple years later, I kind of put myself in the wrong crowd because I still didn't like my Christian friends, still didn't want to hang out with them. And so I got into the wrong crowds going to parties and drinking and smoking. And we were just a bunch of young, dumb teenagers who were enabled by adults who just didn't care. And that was a bad place to be. And I was hiding it from my parents. I was hiding it from my youth leaders. And I was really just hiding it from everybody, even from, what I thought was hiding it from God. I was saying all the right things, doing all the right things. God knew the whole time, but I thought I had that man fooled. And it all kind of came to a head one summer when I was getting ready to lead worship for youth group on Wednesday nights. And it kind of just was like, man, I've wasted my time. There was somebody at the youth group, just another teenager, who was really encouraging me and saying, hey, how are you doing? How can I be praying for you? That guy whittled down my heart of, oh, I want to do whatever the heck I want to. Like a Christian who genuinely cared for me. And that was the first time that I had really felt it in a very personal level. And so that summer, I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened. God got a hold of my heart, and it was a moment where I had not spent any time with those friends ever since. I had not drank or smoked, and the entire rest of my time as a high school student and as a college student, it was just one of those moments where God said, "All right, you're done. You're doing good to do this anymore. You're going to figure out how to do this the right way." And man, was I not a perfect Christian after that. I still tried those little things to kind of run away. And for me, it was kind of this push towards figuring out who I wanted to be in light of who God made me to be. And so I was getting really into music at the time, like really into learning new stuff, trying to figure out how to lead worship for people and also lead myself in that same worship. A lot of the time before, it had been this performative, all right, we're going to sound good, we're going to make it sound good, and it doesn't matter what's happening inside of me because I'm supposed to be doing it for them. And so I was trying to figure out how to change that perspective. And I think I got to a point in late high school where I was really ready to just kind of go to college. I was in a weird gap year type of thing. Mm-hmm. And my parents were like, all right, we'll send you to college, which then I moved 300 yards down the road to the guys' dorm on campus of the college that I was living at. And for me, it was this moment of, oh man, I am nowhere near the person that I thought I was, because living with a bunch of other 18 to 20-year-olds kind of highlighted the places that I was still struggling with. And so as I'm continuing to push myself in college, there's one guy who decided, I'm not going to let you continue to fester in the sin that you're in. And it was kind of that same feeling back when I was 15 years old of this one friend who's showing me Christ, who is exempling Christ for me. And I think that moment was very kind of like character building. God using this one guy who did not care if he hurt my feelings in the moment. He cared about the person who I was becoming. And so he said all the things that needed to be said. Sometimes they were a little more mean than maybe they needed to be. But that helps me kind of grow into the person I am now when we can have conversations and disagree on stuff. And, we still come out the other end saying, hey, we're still friends. We just disagree on these little pieces. And so throughout all of those moments, God was kind of continuing to break down my hardened heart and kind of push me into the person that he knew that I was going to be, the person that he made me to be. And then, a couple years down the line in college, I met a youth pastor at the church that I'm at now, said, hey, we need a music person. And I said, I do music, but I got another 2 years of college left. I've still got to kind of figure out where I'm going, what God wants me to do. He said, hey, that's cool. Do you know anybody? And I said, yeah, here's a person. That didn't work out. And so he was like, hey, come out, do an internship. And I was like, I don't know, it's weird. It's 6 hours away from home. I hadn't left home really ever yet. And out of a step of faith and a kind of a kick out of the door of my parents' house, I came out here and I met Andy and a couple other awesome dudes who were also doing the internship. And God used this place to continue to build, this sense of, all right, clearly God is working on you and breaking you down in the ways that you need to be broken down. So let's continue this. And God used this place to do that. And for some reason, they wanted me back. And that's been super awesome to kind of just come back and continue to grow. It's probably super weird for the people here at the church who are like, hey, we saw you when you were this tall. I mean, not actually, but like even just emotionally and spiritually, like I didn't really know where I was when I first got here. And now I've kind of found where I kind of stand on a lot of stuff. So I'm sure it's kind of jarring for some of the people who saw me then.
Yeah, and to kind of make a comment, like top down, people letting you just kind of figure out various things is really interesting to watch here, especially like from our elders all the way to the day-to-day lay person. It's like, and I was even thinking about that in like prepping for this, like, wow, that really was 2 years ago, which isn't that long ago, but it's kind of like life's just been moving so fast to then think like, wow, like we met and we were in this, Matt and I had this little office that we both had like, the hand-me-down desks. Yep. And I sat like right in the doorway and he had a desk like to my side.
Yeah.
And Matt and I did not get along the best. We can add this. Yeah. Like we didn't disagree. We just like two of my friends from high school were also doing the internship. Yep. One of which I am very close with. And so these two guys who I'd known for a little while, who I was really good buddies with. And then there was like this new guy from PA who was super busy all summer. And so we didn't really get a chance to like get to know him because he was always doing this or that. So
and come to find out that I was like candidating that whole summer basically.
I feel like we all knew that, but I think you realized that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, because the three of us, other interns were like, we're at Willow Hill Baptist Church. We're at Willow Hill's stage for VBS.
Yeah.
But all of us here at Willow Hill, like the Willow Hill guys kind of knew. I mean, we didn't know. I don't think we had like heard anything, but we were like, I think this is the direction it's going. So that's really cool. Are you done? I kind of cut in.
I mean, yeah, I'm just here now.
Yeah.
That was
and you're the worship director, music director.
I do music. Yeah.
You do music. That's really cool. It's really neat. In hearing your testimony, Matt and I joke that like we're always surprised that we're friends because we're both like what would you say? Type A people is what. So we kind of joke that like our friendship is really based in like patience and understanding and like showing the other Christ. Because if not, we would like butt heads constantly. But in hearing your testimony, there's so many things that it's like, I mean, we don't have the same exact testimony, but I think we can we'll have takeaways that are similar from our testimonies. And that's so interesting. Because for me to kind of transition there subtly and smooth transition into my testimony, I grew up in a Christian home where the gospel was present. My family comes from a different denominational background than what I find myself in. I grew up in a Lutheran church. My dad's a Lutheran pastor. And a quick aside, I feel like I have to put some respect back on the name of certain Lutherans. I grew up in the LCMS, which is not the Lutheran churches that you see pride flags outside of, or like women pastors. This is like the conservative, evangelical, Martin Luther Lutheranism. And for growing up in that, I am so grateful. Like, because that's where I grew up learning about, the inerrancy of Scripture.
Yep.
And like the Trinity, like you name it, orthodoxy, fundamental.
Yeah, a lot of the fundamental things.
All of them. Like that's where that's where I get that from. I get my orthodoxy from my upbringing. The gospel was present. We can maybe get into in a future episode like why I'm not that anymore, and that's kind of still in my testimony. I mean, and you'll kind of hear that. Kind of if you know type thing. But even in trying to prepare to tell my testimony, like those in my mind are two different stories, right? Like my testimony of salvation and why I'm not Lutheran are two different stories. And we can talk about it someday. But that's not this story. When I was in high school, I went to a small Christian school. I grew up in a Christian home, went to this Christian school. And when I got there, I really liked it. Kind of as it went on, and this is like one of the things we have in common, I really started to not like a lot of the people I went to school with. There's a lot of the like good Christian guys that like I knew a thing or two about from their past, from things that like were before they were saved. And I was like, these guys are like hypocrites. Yeah. I know these guys. Like I've heard stories, which who knows if those stories were even true. And so it was like, I don't like this crowd. I kind of fell in with like a weird crowd in high school. It wasn't the bad kids, but it wasn't the greatest group. I'm still friends with most of them, but it was a weird group. They were not, they were, I had good friends in there who remain to this day, and I had people who I've lost touch with, but our whole consensus was kind of like, we're not that group of people, because the feeling was like that group of people didn't like us, when really they were just minding their own business and kind of letting us be us. And some of my own actions definitely fed into like why people didn't talk to me as much. But in high school, we had a Bible class our freshman year of high school that was like men purity class. And for that, I'm forever grateful. We read Every Young Man's Battle. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I forget the name of the guy. The name of the guy that came to my mind, I'm pretty sure is wrong. I think so. I'm not even going to try. But and that really kind of unified the guys in the class, even if I wasn't like in with that crowd, around like, we're going to take our faith seriously. So that was in my head. But then what that also did was show me this major area of my life where I had this shortcoming of like where there was sin in my life was like highlighted. The law did what the law does and just showed me my sin. Yeah. And it proceeded to do that from like freshman year of high school to senior year of high school. Oh, man. And especially like sophomore, junior year was lowest of the lows. The whole time I believed in a God. I knew God was real. I was like thoroughly ingrained in the way I saw the world. It didn't make sense to me and still doesn't make sense to me any other way. God is real. God of the Bible is real. And I know he's holy and just, and I know I'm not, was essentially my heart for like 2 or 3 years. Trying to understand that like where the right place in my obedience was, right? If Jesus died for me, why can't I live for him? Was the like, why can't I do this? And it really was like, it was almost there for me to like talk to either like my youth pastor at the time or, like I did youth group and all that, like my youth pastor or one of my teachers who were pastors, like it was right there. And I just could never work up the courage. And it was this thing that like killed me. And then COVID happened. Man. It was even more of a low to where I was completely isolated from people my own age. And it was just the worst. And I was about like, I don't really have one of those testimonies where I like went and did all these terrible things, but I certainly was open to it because at this point it was, in my mind, it was God, I'm a sinner. I can't fix that. You you know, you would be better off, God, if you just ignored me, was literally like the state of my heart for a while. And so I'm going to go do my own thing. You'll be omniscient, all knowing, all powerful, +1, because just ignore me. Let me be. And then senior year of high school rolls around, and I kind of immediately start falling in with like different people. I was on the golf team with some people who I was kind of buddies with and went from buddies to friends. There were some things that I wanted to do that I shared with one of those friends. And I'll say his name. I shared with Josh. I was on the golf team with Josh, and I shared those things with him. And he was like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, what are you thinking?" Especially given like we had common ground of like, you say you believe this, you say you're acting like this. Like, what are you thinking? And that's still when, I wasn't the best friends with him, didn't like him the most, but I was like, that's a good point. So maybe I won't go do this and that. And then kind of warmed up to him, realized we had a very similar sense of humor. We could make each other die laughing with just like goofy sounds. So like, and that's true. Like, I think the hardest we made each other laugh on the golf course was just funny noises, which if you know Josh and I, nothing's changed in like 5 years. And so we did that. Like, that was happening. I kind of became friends like with the rest of the class, had a falling out with a friend or two. That was all pretty much my fault. And was like, okay, I'm falling in with the people who are like more godly, the more stand-up people. These peers who were people who, as seniors and going into senior year of high school, were like, I want to be a pastor.
Yeah.
People like Josh, people like Gavin, like these super, super loving, kind people who like, it's like, okay, I want to learn from them. And then kind of from like January of 2021, I was like, okay, I'm going to take my faith seriously. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Saw temporary victory over my sin, kind of had some better understanding. The word started to be in the Bible for myself for like the first time ever, really, as this like senior in high school. Again, like growing up in a Christian home, pastor's kid, knowing all the right answers, but now I'm actually like in the word, having questions. And then my sin stays present, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then so like I'm blessed with like having a very accurate timeline of like some of these things. So then from like February on, it was all up in the air again. And then my senior year of high school, we went on this missions trip to Tennessee. That's a whole story in itself. Post-COVID, middle of COVID, whatever you want to call 2021, we went to Tennessee, and there's this pastor on the trip who was kind of, our spiritual leader. And he had us go out and read Colossians 3 by ourselves. And went out all around this. We were staying at this like summer camp place, but like sky view shrunk down. Like that's like small. tiny little summer camp on probably on 40 acres or like tiny, probably more than that, but like tiny summer camp. We're staying at. We all went out, and I opened my Bible to Colossians 3, and I, in the past, and kind of this like trying to get my faith more serious, or like maybe just sitting there in Christian school for 3.5 years, had like circled and highlighted Colossians 3. And it was this like, oh my goodness, this has been here the whole time. But like, it was like, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above.
Yeah.
And it just clicked. Like, oh, because of what Jesus has done, now I can live for him. On the basis of that is my obedience. And like when like you hear the stories of people telling their testimonies of like, this passage spoke directly to me, but like that was it. Like that was God saying, I've been here, I've done this for you. And because part of my testimony was this like running, like, God, forget it. It was no. You are mine, and I'm going to do this in you. And it was like, and in that moment, it was like, I'm free of my sin. Jesus paid it all. And it's not on the basis of, and like this view is not because of my upbringing. This view is because of my heart of stone and my lack of understanding, but like this, oh, I need to keep up my salvation by my obedience was shattered. And it was like, I'm free. Like I am saved because of the work of Jesus. And like I have journal like entries from that trip that say that, like on that day, like I'm free. Like this is it. It starts now and it's beginning or it goes on forever. This is the beginning, goes on forever. Like I'm really free of this. And at that same time, and kind of starting around then, and maybe it was a little bit before this, but definitely starting then, like every time the word was taught for like the next few months, it just spoke directly to certain areas of my life. Gavin gave a devotion on the trip that really like clarified things in certain areas. And then that devotion inspired me to go up to a buddy of mine who I hadn't really talked to a ton, but knew had similar things going on in his life. And that was Mark. And so that's what started, my best friend in the whole wide world. Like I went up to him and was like, hey, like, let's be there for each other. This is something we both want to, improve. Because we had talked before, like we have these same like kind of regrets about, because high school, there's like a month left of high school, but like, let's make the most of it from here on out and let's be there for each other. And we still use some of the like shorthand we came up with that night, like to this day. And so from there on out, I really spent a ton of time in the Word. I had a ton of questions and kind of had a ton of questions already around then. And it was my peers I went to mostly. It was Josh, it was Gavin, it was some of the teachers at my school who have been huge influences in my life. And kind of just ending up in this like, and again, this is a story for another day, but like this Reformed Baptistic camp that I ended up in, like was just kind of like, oh yeah, here's where I am. And there definitely were influences from before all of what we've talked about and continuing on, but that's a when we get to heaven fully to understand moment. But it was this crazy time. And then a couple months after I graduated high school, I moved away to Akron, where I lived for 10 months. I was living with my grandfather, and I was broke. I was working a job that paid me pretty much what I needed to survive and nothing else. And so there was a ton of time just me in my room in the Word or like listening to sermons, ton of that. And my peers remained a huge, backing too of like, here's somebody to check out. Here's a book to read. Here's this, here's that. And it was just that time in the Word that really like, I look back on it and like, that's most of what I did. Like I would go to work, I'd kind of bum around the Akron Canton area, or I'd be at home reading my Bible, listening to sermons for like almost a year. That was like this like intensive. And then like, really doing that and then moving back, long story short, back with my parents, kind of taking a while to find myself, this church being a big part of kind of what grounded me. And because I didn't go off to college right away. I took a gap year for 3 years before I even did online. So I started working, and I really did start working because one of the pastors here was like, you need to get a job. You're 18. I might have been 19. Like, you're 19. You're not in school, and that's fine, but you need to do something. And that job really gave me like grounding, the job I ended up at. And then the whole time, I'd say probably since the summer of when I graduated to now, it was kind of this like, I think ministry, working somewhere in ministry, teaching is like what I feel called to do. And the people here heard that and offered me a part-time internship the summer that you had, like, and they offered that, I think, like a week or two before it started. And I was like, sure. Like, I'm no stranger to being around church work. Yeah. And I would love to teach. I'd love to, get more involved. And that's kind of what it became for me. It was like another like intensive of like, okay, get involved and acquainted with the church you're in. Yeah. Because I'm a single guy at a church. And so it's really hard to get connected. And that did that. And it's blossomed from there. And the, kind of the ending conclusion is like, even as a Christian, you still struggle with your sin. And it's those inward trials that draw you closer to Christ and really show you the grace that is still there along with your weakness is just continue to be such a big part of my faith, is seeing God's strength through my weakness, which sounds so like modest and look how humble I am.
Yeah.
But
look at how much better.
Yeah, look how much better I am. But there really is no other story besides my faith than, God is in control in the salvation of sinners, and he does it for his glory. And that's like, if you'd get me talking about theology, you'll see there's more to that. But like, that's why I believe what I believe and why I am who I am. And it's crazy to see like the what God has done and how I can't like tell you, A to Z of what happened, because there's so many factors that he's used. Like, that's what's so trippy to me. It's like, I wish I could be like, and then it was just this one thing that led to this, but it's like, I have to like sit and really think about like, well, when was the first time I thought about this? And what was that? And it's because it's not about that. It's not about, like you said, it's not about this prayer. It's not about how good your confession of faith is. It's about like, it's all about God and what he does in our lives. And it's just crazy to see. So,
yeah. You talking about the internship was like, I found out that I was sharing an office with somebody when I showed up.
I'm so sorry.
And like,
because it's probably when like they realized.
Yeah, they were probably like,
it was,
oh my
it was
goodness.
Super last minute that I joined. I think it was literally like a week or two before.
Yeah, I think the first day we were in the office, we were both like really like kind of like,
hey man,
hands off, like, hey, how's it going? Really awkward. And I was like, hey, do you want the big desk? Because there was a big desk in the room, like, and then there was a small desk in the room.
Yeah, and to both of our credits, I mean, you were extremely busy, but I was my part-time internship I was in 2 days.
Yeah, you were in like Wednesday.
I was in Wednesday and Friday. And yet, and if you're one of the pastors of Willow Hill listening to this, I love you guys. And yet I feel like I had the same workload as like Josh and Jared. And I was working the other time. Like I was working full time. I was working Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at a job where I was like kind of a supervisor doing a lot.
Yeah.
So it was just, we were both really busy. In defense of us not really being like buddy.
Yeah.
That was just my side of it. And then you were 10 times more busy. So it was like, but yeah, it was kind of this like, hey man, what's up? We had met before like once.
Yeah, like once when I came out to visit.
So like we knew each other, but we also knew that there were some like, I think we already knew there were some differences in approach to things.
Yeah.
Cause nothing says getting to know you like, let me draw the line for where I think like corporate worship should be done. So that was definitely, it took some time, but yeah, the internship was crazy.
Yeah. I think like it was that first day where we decided that you were going to be my secretary and sit in front of the door. I think that was...
I ran interception so people could talk to Matt.
And then I was never in my office.
Yeah. And so it
never there.
It was a really easy secretary job. Probably the easiest one I've had.
Yeah. Crazy times. Maybe one day we'll bring out some random stories from
for
from
sure.
our time.
I think random stories from our time interning will just happen naturally, but it's such a blessing. I'm so grateful. Looking back on like factors of what's made me who I am, like those internships I did the two, I did a part-time and a full-time, are just were so clarifying. And you give you such like hands-on experience in ministry.
Yeah.
So spontaneous takeaway from both of our testimonies, I have at least one, and that is peer influence is like nothing else.
Yeah.
And in multiple ways. One, like being the person to be like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? Yeah. We both had people who cared enough and were bold enough to do that for us, which is crazy. So even hearing it for myself, like trying to be that for people again.
Yeah.
And just like how important that is. So if you are like a youth, if you're from 18 to 24 listening to this, like that is so important. And even, yeah, being the person to be like, hey, what are you doing? And then being that person to like walk beside somebody. Like that's what friendship is. And that's what friendship founded in the faith is this like shoulder to shoulder. Because, you know, you can do the whole 4 loves thing of like what friendship love is. As that shoulder to shoulder. And I have, that is my best friendships is the people who like, you know, there can be people who I've spent more time around for the rest of my life than the people who we are on mission together walking side by side. Because there's something different about that you need to find friends who you can confess your sin to, tell the truth to, and just be there for, pray for. That is so important. And like those are your most important friendships. And even if it's one, and even if it's with somebody who you have virtually nothing in common with.
Yep.
And I don't just say that because of us. Like that's a lot of my friendships. And that's where if you're in a church, and it may be because this is hitting the interwebs and it's going far and wide. If you're in a church and there aren't people your own age, that's not a limitation in the body of Christ. Like, go up to your pastors, go up to maybe a guy who's a young dad, like, and find those friendships, because like in the body of Christ, in the church, you can have those friendships that are intergenerational. Like some of my best friends are like 10 years older than me. And then some of my like really good buddies are like 20, 30, 40 years older than me. Like some of the people who I will go to first when I need help or when I need advice or when I just want to laugh and need to take my mind off something. Like, and because like, if you're a man of God, like, or a woman of God, like that's what you need. You need those people, and the people just to be your friends. And like, that is so important. And that's part of, and this is maybe getting off in a rabbit hole, but like, that's part of what discipleship can look like. If you're trying to be like, oh, I need discipleship or I want to disciple people, that's part of what it looks like, is just being there for people when in the good times and in the bad, in like the chill. It's that like, that is such an important thing that we're like, just to go alongside people for when they need us and like have that like service mindset, because I guarantee you that's what the people who went up to you were thinking. Or like the people who were around me before we were really like friends were like, well, I'm gonna be there for them. And that's just so important. So that's like my big takeaway is just like, wow, that is such an important part in both of our stories.
Yeah. I think even too, like, to kind of build off of what you're saying at the same time, is like, you've got to find people who are unafraid to say the things that need to be said. In sometimes an unloving way, to make it to a point where you can hear it. There were times in my life where my heart was so hardened to the idea that I could have been living in sin or having anything going on, that I had to have people go, hey, stop being dumb for just half a second. And like actually look at yourself. Like, because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have gotten out of some of the sinful lifestyles I was living in. And then to lead right back into what you said, to then also have that friend come beside. They need to be able to do both. And that's one of my biggest regrets from like college, was I was often the wrecking ball and not the cleanup crew. And I really wish that I had taken more time to do some of the extra cleanup with that person, instead of just breaking down the walls and leaving them there to, just put them right back up. And so find somebody, and I'm looking directly at the camera because and if you don't see it, then stinks, but find somebody who is actively willing to do both parts, be unafraid to say the hard things, and then be there with you to clean it up. That's really, really important.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have anything else to say. If you want to suggest episode ideas, we have an email address. We have bizarresunday@gmail.com. Email us with your episode ideas or comments or feedback. Let us know. I think we'll have social medias. It'll all be in the show notes in the description. Check it out. We'll see what we actually get done this afternoon. But I hope you enjoy and have a good one.
Yeah. Peace.